Sasquatch Prospector here. Another day. I would say it's a beautiful day, but it's not quite that today. It's rainy Pacific Northwest day, but nonetheless, here we are, the Fraser Canyon. So we're about to come up on some really cool history with Yale, Lytton, Lillooet. We talk all about the Fraser, the Americans that tried to invade, all kinds of things. Minutes, we're coming up on Hills Bar, the richest gravel bar in BC, guys. It's so rich you could pull over an ounce an hour out of the bar. Guys would be working, they'd make $12,000 a day working the Hills Bar. And it's just before Yale. There's sawmill bars. So we're gonna talk all about the gold bars of the Fraser and what did mining on the Fraser River look like. 1858 was when the gold rush started. Gold is always discovered before the actual rush. So, you know, if the rush is 1858 or like same thing with California, 1849. Gold is always discovered like a year or two before, and then obviously it gets reported, word has to spread, and then people have to get there. Back in the day, that could take several months or years, depending on how much the word got out. So basically the gold rush started in 1858, and Yale, which is the town we're about to pull into, was a city. It was a huge city. It was in the gold fields, but it was also stopping off for the gold fields, heading onto the Caribou later on in the 1860s. It became kind of like the main town that you would stop at before you started on the Caribou Wagon Road. But we're just driving now. This is the modern version of it. There was hydraulicking that went on here, dredging, sluicing. And it wasn't just gravel bars, guys, like sandbars, like except made of gravel. It was benches, the sides of mountains. And then we're going to be spending the night in Lillooet, which has a series of gold rushes. Lillooet had the Fraser Gold Rush, the Cayush Creek Gold Rush, and the Bridge River Gold Rush. So Lillooet's kind of a hub. So between Hope and Yale, guys, there's over 30 bars. And when I say bar, okay, guys, I'm alluding to a gravel bar. So similar to like a sandbar, like out on the ocean or something. A gravel bar, the Fraser River has hundreds and hundreds of gravel bars that over many millions of years, gold has washed into the river, washed down the river, and it gets trapped in these gravel bars. And so guys were finding gold in these bars and mining the bars. When we go through some of the tunnels, there's Sailor Bar, China Bar, Boston Bar. These are all alluding to gold bars. The first tunnel, let's see what this one is. They're all alluding to gold rush zones or areas of the river where gold was found. And between Hope and Yale, just that one little stretch, oh, this is the Yale tunnel. Between Hope and Yale, guys, there's over 30. That's a lot of bars, and Hills Bar was by far the most profitable. It's the most profitable piece of real estate in British Columbia, guys. It's about 137 feet long, 45 meters long, and it's just this little gravel bar, and it was buried. If the river would rise high enough, it would just bury it. You wouldn't even be able to see it. That's the case with a lot of these bars. And so it also makes mining it hard. They could only get out so far on the bar and down so deep because the river fluctuates and stuff, and so the river's eating your progress, right? So they would use wing damming or just straight up damming the river, which is super illegal nowadays. If somebody from the Ministry of Mines sees you trying to dam the Fraser River nowadays, you'd go to jail. But back in the day, that was, like in talking 1850s here, 1860s, that was the only option these guys had, was really shallow placer diggings, like hand panning and stuff on the bar. Some guys tried dredging, but dredging is a really hard operation. You go broke a lot of times with dredging, because your operational costs are just so high that you got to really have the claim be paying out for a dredge to really make any sense. When I refer to a bar, I'm referring to a gravel bar. So just think of it in your mind, think of a sandbar, but it's made of gravel, and that's what guys were mining. And like I said, they're doing the banks of the river, and just in that one little stretch from Hope to Yale was over 30 gold-bearing bars, guys, that guys were mining all the way up from Hope to Yale. And then past Yale, from Yale to Lytton, there's about more than 50 of them. And then past Lytton to Pavilion, even more, guys. So there's like hundreds and hundreds of gold bars on the Fraser that were being tapped. And once we get over to like Pavilion, Fountain area, that's kind of where after that it starts to peter off a bit, and there's not really much gold. But then we've got the Bridge River Gold Rush, which we're going to be talking about. Cayush Creek, this is all Lillooet stuff. So what's this one? Saddle Rock Tunnel. A couple of the tunnels are named after the like Sailor Bar, China Bar, Boston Bar, Foster's Bar. Also of note is the trains. There's a directional running agreement between CP and CN for the canyon. So, you know, CP, CN are notorious enemies. They hate each other. But this one stretch, they specifically have to share the right-of-ways for the railway. So one side of the canyon is CN, one side of the canyon is CP. And we're going to go to the Cisco bridges near Lytton, where there's 2 train bridges where they cross over. They switch sides on either side of the canyon, but they have a directional running agreement for this chunk of the Fraser. So they can basically both use each other's lines. So the one will go one way, the other will go another way, and that's how they kind of control traffic. But it's one of the only sections in Canada where the 2 train companies share the track. And that's just because, obviously, look at where you are. There's not really much real estate for building a railroad. Coming up on the last tunnel here, which one's this? Oh, China Bar Tunnel, see? Yeah. This one's a long one. And every now and then you get that guy that wants to rev the engine in the tunnel in the summertime. It's always nice. So clearly we're near China Bar. We passed Sailor Bar. We're coming up on Boston Bar. Ooh, okay. This is better. Yeah, that's the thing about BC is that you could, like, it changes in like 10 minutes. You're like really shitty one second and then fine the next. But see what I mean? Like, there's nothing. There's no houses. There's barely even gas stations. It's a native gift shop. That's about it. So talk about like the history of the Fraser River Rush and how it all started. So in the 1857 area, the Thompson native band was mining gold and they had found gold. And then they sent a shipment, Governor Douglas sent a shipment of 800 ounces down to the San Francisco Mint to get minted into coins. And then all the guys in San Francisco were like, well, where's this gold coming from? And then sure enough, this is the Fraser River in British Columbia. And so this instigated a series of events that has a lot to do with what's going on now, actually. And this will give you guys an idea of when I shoot these videos. You can't usually tell when these are shot. They sent 800 ounces of gold down to the San Francisco Mint to get minted. And the guys in San Francisco were like, oh, okay, well, this is quite a lot of gold. And it was coarse, nice coarse gold. A stampede of about 30,000 Americans came. They're all Californian guys too, right? They're all from the California Gold Rush, 49ers, all grizzled California guys. They all came up here. And they started mining the bars of the Fraser. But what's really funny about the whole thing, and especially now, is that they were worried about the Americans bringing all their guns and, like, you know, American style things, like, because they would sell liquor to the natives and stuff, and, you know, a whole bunch of nasty things that the British didn't want happening. So they instituted this law that anybody that wanted to go to the Fraser River Gold Rush had to pass through Victoria, and you had to register in Victoria, you had to get a mining license, you know, pay the government money, get your license, and then you were supposed to access the gold fields up the Fraser River. And part of the strategy behind this was to strip the Americans of their guns, because we don't have guns in Canada, even back then, Canadians didn't use guns. We had rifles and stuff for hunting and stuff, but not Smith and Wessons and stuff like that. So they would take the Americans' guns away, and, you know, confiscate whatever contraband and stuff that they were going to sell to the natives, and then send them up the river. But the Americans' answer to this was, it's called the Whatcom Trail, and this plays into the story a little bit later. So the Whatcom Trail was a trail from Bellingham up over the mountains in secret into the Fraser River. So it's basically like, oh, I don't want to go to Victoria and buy a mining license and have my guns taken away, and because that was the British trying to control the influx of these Americans. And so what the Americans did was they're like, oh, well, we'll just make our own trail then, and we'll just go in through secret. So what they did was they just basically violated the borders for the British. They said, whatever, we don't care. We're not going to Victoria. They made the Whatcom Trail, which goes from Bellingham to Hope. And then once they're in Hope, they're on the Fraser River and they're ready to go, right? But they hadn't paid for a mining license. They still had their firearms. You know, they had all their contraband. Then they go up the river and start causing all kinds of problems. So now fast forward, you've got thousands of Americans all over the bar. And with Hills Bar, some of the Canadians got upset, or like, well, the Canadians were the British settlers at the time. They found all this gold and they were like, why are the Americans coming and taking it? There was this whole thing at Yale where the Canadians got really mad and then the Americans got really mad. And then the Americans said, oh, well, we'll share it with you. And then the Americans were talking about annexing this part of the Fraser River. So had this gold rush not happened, same thing with the way California worked down south, it could have very likely ended up in American hands, because America had been talking about annexing this for a while. And then when the gold rush came, it kind of kicked the British in the ass a little bit and was like, all right, let's make this a colony. So British Columbia became a British colony because of the Fraser River gold rush. And that was to partially fend off a barrage of Americans that were just hell-bent on taking all the gold out of here and annexing it and making it part of, like, I think at that point it was the Washington Territory or whatever American territory it was. So it's just funny because you got everything going on now in the States, border security and Canadians and invading and all this stuff. And it's like, back in the 1850s, they straight up just didn't go through the proper procedures, didn't get mining licenses, took the Whatcom Trail and just ended up right on the bars of the Fraser. And then once they got there, to make matters worse, they got in fights with the native populations because, there was like a lot of these dudes that had been in the California goldfields were part of the, the Indian Wars down in the South. So like, Wyoming, all those places. It was not good. But the Hudson's Bay Company didn't exploit the natives in the same way. Like I'm sure they exploited the natives to some degree, right? Everybody did back then. But the Americans were straight up violent and aggressive and like threatening, and told the natives to get away, and that this is their gold. Whereas the HBC guys were more diplomatic. And especially for example, David Thompson, he married a native woman and had kids with the native woman, and then he used the child, because the child would have learned how to speak both English and the Native American language. The child would become a translator, and then for like a whole generation of people, you would have this translator that was of like Native American blood and of British blood. And so it wasn't like they were nice and, rolling out the red carpet for them, but they weren't as brutal as the Americans. And so we're coming up on a place called Lytton, and Lytton's got a whole bunch of history, but one of the things that happened in Lytton that was really, really like bad in a lot of ways was the Fraser Canyon War. And this is again the Americans causing all this trouble. Nothing's changed. 160 some years later, we're still got the same old game, right? So basically, what happened was miners were all over the Fraser, and the natives have been here for 10,000, 12,000 years. It's their land. They had fishing grounds, hunting grounds. They had their own thing. They started mining gold when they started to get in contact with the HBC guys, because they're like, oh, these guys actually it had no value to the natives. Native to native, it wasn't really worth anything. But, you go into a Hudson's Bay trading post with a bunch of gold, yeah, you'd be walking out with whatever they had to sell you at that point, because they just wanted gold to send it back to Britain to, fund the British Empire and for the Queen and the King and all that. And so the Americans came in, 30,000 Americans. It was American rush. Even though it was in Canada, it was a mostly American rush. So you had 30,000 Americans. And so 2 French prospectors were decapitated, and their bodies were found floating in the river just around Yale. And so this set off a whole, because the natives were mad, right? They were fed up. They were like, enough of this. And so this set off a whole string of events of the Americans who, like I said, had been down in the South in California. They had fought through some of these Indian wars. They weren't the nicest folks. And so what was their response? They formed 3 regiments. They formed the Whatcom Regiment, which was a bunch of Southern guys under the command of Captain Graham. And they were just a bunch of Southern dudes that were for annexation of Canada and wanted to basically just take what was theirs. And there was the Austria Company, which was John Centrist. He had a bunch of, this was more like French-German immigrants, and they had fought in Nicaragua in 1853 in Nicaragua. There's a whole thing in Nicaragua. They were war guys, right? They were soldiers. And then the final company was the New York Pike Company, and that was run by Captain Snyder. And so these 3 regiments started marching up the Fraser Canyon. They were heading to Kamchin, which was the main city for the natives at the time. Kamchin that's what it is in native, is now Lytton. So this happened at Lytton. We're just about to come up on Lytton. And so these guys, they're marching all through, like what you see here. They're marching for days. There's 6 regiments, but there's only 3 companies of name, right, that I can find. And those are those 3 companies. And so they're marching and marching. And one time, the Whatcom Company never actually made it to Kamchin because they got in a gunfight. So it was in the middle of the night, and it wasn't natives, what you would think. What happened was there was a misfire of a rifle in camp that night, and they all shot each other because they thought they were being invaded by like the natives that were doing like a night raid on them. And so you had all this whole Whatcom regiment, the annexation. They had different views. The New York City Pike Company, they wanted to pacify the natives, and they understood like some are good, some are bad. Let's make this work. The other one was kind of in the middle, and then the Whatcom Company, they were straight up like, hey, we're going to exterminate these people, and then we're going to annex this territory. They were like from the south. They were like southern dudes from like Georgia and, you know, that part of the world. And we're talking 1850s guys, right? So just rewind back to what the mindset would have been. So these guys, they're in camp at night, and a rifle goes off. Like, this is literally just a misfire of a rifle. And a huge gunfight ensues. Everybody starts shooting at each other. They're all friendly fire. Everybody's shooting each other. And I think there was about 2 guys left at the end of the gunfight. And it was completely self-inflicted. Like, they weren't attacked by natives. There was a misfire, and the Americans all ended up shooting each other, and the Whatcom regiment was no more. But the New York regiment and the Austrian regiment, they were still alive and didn't all shoot each other in a gunfight. So then they were like, all right, we'll go to Camp Cheen, we'll talk to the natives. And then they got to Camp Cheen. There was a discussion. What it came down to was they said that to the natives, and this is the Thompson natives, if you do this again, like as in terrorize the miners, cut off, like decapitate people, kill any of the white miners that were in the canyon working, we will come back with thousands of men and we will wipe you off the face of the earth. And so the chiefs at this point were like, well, like what do we have to do? It ended up never actually being a war. Like, no war was ever fought. Like, people died. Like, there were native villages were burnt and a few chiefs were murdered. I think about 36 people on there's conflicting reports, right? It's the 1850s, guys. Records weren't kept that well, but if one person dying is too many, right? So the whole point is a bunch of people died, but it never transpired into a war like people thought it was going to. But it was called the Fraser Canyon War. So in the end, British Columbia became a colony. The Royal Engineers showed up, you know, Governor Douglas, RCMP, and the Fraser Canyon Gold Rush. It's the reason British Columbia became a colony, guys. It's very relevant to what's going on now in the world. We've been driving up the route that these guys would have taken to go to Camp Cheen to confront the natives. But yeah, guys, that's a little bit about the Fraser Canyon War. Good old America, eh? Alrighty, guys, so here we are, Fraser River Canyon. Just at a rest stop here. Passing a whole series of gold bars, guys. Like I said, we passed Kanaka Bar. That's a Hawaiian name, Kanaka. So that'd be Hawaiian gold miners. Boston Bar, right? Americans. So, and like I said, guys, from Yale up to Lytton is like 50 gold bars, more than 50 gold bars. So there's tons of them, absolutely tons of them. This is the actual highway, the Trans-Canada Highway. You can see across the other way there, the Fraser River Canyon, the power lines. Oh yeah, these are all the towns: Ashcroft, Cache Creek, Clinton, Loon Lake, Lillooet, Logan Lake, Lytton, Merritt, Nicola Valley, Quilchena, Upper Nicola, 70 Mile House, Spence's Bridge, Wallachine. So from here, Hope, all the way up to Pavilion right here, guys. This is all gold. So this is the Fraser River, all the way up here. These are all gold bars here, guys. Tons of gold bars here. This is the Thompson, guys. So this is the Thompson River, so Spence's Bridge, Ashcroft. This is the Thompson continuation, right? Kamloops Link, North Thompson, South Thompson. Lots going on here. We're here, guys, just before Lytton, otherwise known as Camp Cheen. Stein Valley Park. That's a really good area to go. Stein Valley, just like right over there. It's great for exploring, camping. Pretty boondocky though, here in the bush in Stein Valley. So we're on the Trans-Canada Highway. We're gonna take the 12 now. But this is Lytton, guys. We might see a little bit of it, but it's entirely devastated, guys. The whole thing burnt to a crisp, quite literally. There's a few portables, like I said, for guys working in the town. It was destroyed. We don't usually have places in BC that get leveled like this, but Lytton really, it got it hard. Lytton was a huge part of the history, guys. Like, it's the confluence of the Fraser and the Thompson River. It was huge back in the day. Now it's just, like, look at this. There's nothing. It's burnt. This used to be a whole town flourishing. Like, it's all gone. Everything. The museums, the hotels, everything. Look, the sign for the museum's still up. You're watching a ghost town be birthed here, guys. This is how it happens, right? Like, the jobs dry up, the work dries up, the resources, a fire comes, a lot of the towns back in the old days are ghost towns just because they burnt in a fire, and that was it. Construction area, like it hasn't recovered. I hope it does, but it will never be what it was. So it's really sad. You can see, look, even the police station is a portable, because they're just like they're building some houses here actually now. But like Sandon burnt in a fire several times. Caslow burnt in a fire, because all these old towns are all made of wood, right? Every single building was made of wood. They didn't use brick out here. Not like in Ontario, we had all these Scottish stonemasons, right, making these beautiful brick buildings.
141.
This next part is a little sketchy. There's like it narrows to like one way only. So this is one of the more precipitous sections of the Fraser Canyon. You can see an outcrop there. They were hydraulically washed those. That outcropping over there, they'd wash those with a water monitor. So we're in prime gold bar territory, guys. All the way since we've been going from Lytton all the way to Lillooet. And then, like I said, a little bit past Lillooet up to Pavilion. Gold, right? It's a huge gold field, guys. Huge amounts of gold here. It's only 106 clicks, but the road is very sketchy. So you're only doing like 60 the whole time. So it takes about 2 hours to get to Gold Bridge, because you're doing about 40 to 60 when you on the road. You're not going 100 on that road, put it that way. This is Lillooet, guys. We're in Lillooet. Welcome to Lillooet. So you can see, look at the mountains here, guys. That'd be Duffy Lake. That's Duffy Lake Road. So if we had come from Whistler, Pemberton, like Squamish, that's that really big switchbacky, like crazy road. So Cayush Creek, Gold Rush. There was a gold rush in that canyon, Cayush Creek, Panning Reserve. This is the Bridge of 23 Camels. We'll talk more about that. There's all kinds of stuff. The kilowatt structure for the dams, a whole Pelton wheel over there. This is all tomorrow. There's tons here. Lillooet's got a lot. Gold Bridge, that's where we're heading tomorrow. Gold Bridge, Braylorne. We're gonna do the ghost towns. Braylorne's actually really interesting. Braylorne's having a resurgence. The biggest mining camp in British Columbia. So yeah, Seton Portage, Gold Bridge 106. That's where we're heading tomorrow. Gold Bridge. Lillooet's got tons. That's why I was thinking, I'm like, let's go to Lillooet. Like, Lillooet's great. Yeah, Lillooet's great. Train tracks. Yeah, they've got a train station. They've got more billboards here. Bridge River Valley. A&W. They got a pizza joint here too. It's a couple restaurants. So that's for if you get in late at night. Manny's Corner. It's pretty small though. Like, it's not really a city. It's more of a small town. It's really nice country here. You see how high the mountains are, guys? It's like Switzerland here. Most of the times I've been to Lillooet, I've just passed through, but every time I come here, I'm like, I need to spend more time here. It's like, but it's out of the way. Like, Lillooet's one of those places you got to go out of your way to get here. Like, you gotta make an effort to get to Lillooet. But I was like, why not?